We had Frank Molinaro, who was a four-time All-American down in Rio. Finished, he lost in the bronze medal match just at the last second to pick it up, get leverage, get his knees down. It was close. And then the Nick Nine Wrestling Club also had Franklin Gomez representing Puerto Rico. So,
Yep.
yeah.
All right. Well, I don't have any opening statements, so we're really we were really happy, proud of the effort that Molinaro and Gomez put in. They both, I think, were wrestled great. I think Molinaro is a great story, really, of just a guy who a year ago, nobody would have thought he would be competing for a medal at the Olympics, and through just dedication and discipline and commitment, he was able to take a huge step up and showed the world that he's right there with the best of them. He lost to a world champion and for the bronze medal, the reigning world champion for the bronze medal match. So and his effort was great, fighting spirit. I think he represented our country well, represented our program well, and so close to winning a medal. But that's how things go. So. I haven't really talked to him. I wasn't on the floor with him. So I was in the stands, and I saw him briefly afterwards, but he was kind of surrounded by family and friends, and so I didn't really didn't want to. Wasn't really the time to talk to him too much. But it seems like he's in good spirits. I mean, Coach Cody was with him, and he said after the match he was clearly disappointed, but he said, "Hey, I did everything I could out there," and he left it out on the mat. Left it all out on the mat, and so I think he can hold his head high, and I think as a country, the wrestling world is proud of his effort, and he was the guy. He was the guy, and he was close.
That first match, or it wasn't his first, but the match with the up there.
Yeah.
And that was so dramatic, and you're, I'm guessing, in the stands for that one as well.
Yeah.
What was that like for you watching that, and then he kind of laid the hammer down after all of that?
Yeah, I mean, Frank's not afraid to go toe-to-toe with you, I mean, and because he wrestles hard, he gets a lot of, people come out right off the whistle and will, try to hit him or, thumb him in the eye or biting is a little ridiculous, obviously. I mean, it's just like, come on, you don't, but, I mean, what do you even say about that? I thought, the referees weren't really willing to listen when he said, "Hey, the guy just bit me." And then they showed it up on the big screen, and everyone in the crowd saw that it was, he was like, went for a big bite, and like, I mean, there's no, obviously no sport, anything where you bite, I mean, it's, so that, that's a poor job on the officials' part. I think it was pretty blatant, but that's wrestling. I mean, they're battling, and it shows you, I mean, how important medals are to these wrestlers in the wrestling world. I mean, we saw a lot of craziness, obviously, over there. I mean, that Mongolian coach's protest was pretty wild. I was sitting there, like, kind of just, I felt bad for the Mongolians because they're two grown men rushing to the mat, bawling their eyes out because they think their guy just won a bronze medal, but we see the official is going to give the other guy the point, and the other guy's going to win, and then they protested. That was the biggest story in Olympic wrestling, which is obviously not good for our sport. But the only positive is it shows you just how important Olympics and medals are in the sport of wrestling worldwide. Because they win a bronze medal, it probably changes their lives. The coaches and the athlete, obviously. So wrestling's very, very important, or the Olympics are very important to the sport of wrestling. But when you're coming off a cycle where we're almost eliminated from the Olympics, you don't know how. Obviously, that doesn't look great. Shows there's passion, but that might not be the right kind of passion we want to display.
Passion, somebody's so involved in the sport at some of the levels as you are. You see a guy like Burroughs. Are you kind of curious to see how he responds here moving forward?
Well, I think Jordan Burroughs is a guy that you could make a pretty darn good argument that he's the best American freestyle wrestler ever right now. So I mean, he has nothing to prove, and the sport's changed. I mean, you have Russians and in 10 weight classes, 10 representing 10 different countries, 10 in a weight class now, where it used to be where there was one. You have Russians represent, like Molinaro, his first round, he drew Poland, but we knew it was a former Russian who, had switched to wrestle for Poland, and he was the Russians' #1 guy not too long ago. So it's a very competitive time right now in the sport of wrestling. Jordan Burroughs is, he's an incredible champion, and I think he put a ton of pressure on himself going in, and you could see he was a little bit different just in the training camps and leading up towards the games. And it'll be interesting. I mean, he doesn't have anything to prove. He could retire right now as maybe the best freestyle wrestler ever. Everyone's going to make their own arguments there, but if he continues to wrestle, that's good for our country too, obviously, because he wins.
When you're sitting in the stands, is it hard to turn off the coach aspect of it, or are you kind of yelling things that you normally would be if you're on that side?
No, I don't yell too much. I mean, maybe with the exception of Gomez's match when he got cheated, we kind of I was sitting with Mark McKnight, and we were behind a lot of the referees, and I don't know how we got those tickets, but we were around a lot of the bigwigs from the other countries, the politicians, and we were pretty loud there. But that was more about just not telling Franklin what to do. So no, I don't think they're going to hear me. I mean, we're yelling to, just because that's what you do in the crowd. But not, he's not hearing anything I'm saying.
When such kind of chaos before the wrestling, the Olympics, is particularly go around, and all of the uncertainty that happened before that, seeing some of these officiating things happen, it's probably not the best representation of what the sport needs to be in the Olympics moving forward. And I
Yeah.
saw you have some comments on Twitter about similar.
Yeah, I think I believe the main reason that wrestling was nearly dropped from the Olympics. I mean, how do you drop wrestling from the Olympics? It's one of the original sports, if not the original sport. But I think it's based on a lot of the corruption that's very clear, and that comes from from the Russian countries. And their wrestling's huge. It is probably their best sport. I mean, wrestling, they have dominated from the beginning, and they're still, a notch or two ahead of the rest. It's, Iran's probably 2-3, we're 2-3-4. Azerbaijan is, another Russian country there that's right up in the top 3. But it's very disappointing that it's so blatant, and the corruption. You have officials that are either doing favors for their friends, or they're being paid. You hear of wrestlers being paid, and we have firsthand experience through the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club. So that stuff goes on, and so after wrestling's almost dropped from the Olympics, none of that has been cleaned up, which is very disappointing, obviously, because that's and how do you justify? You have a kid, Franklin Gomez, who has trained his whole life, sacrificed a lot, comes from nothing, and he was wrestling extremely well. And you expect in our sport that the refs are going to give the other, they're going to give him a point here or there, but to just take the match from him when it was very clear, you could see the communication. It's unacceptable. So yeah, it's very disappointing. But it runs real deep into the culture there. It's just I don't think that the Russians, and they think that it's wrong. It's just kind of how they operate. That's how the country operates. So, but it is wrong. It is wrong. And the sport of wrestling, our countries need, the countries that aren't involved, because several wrestlers got cheated. The Gomez one, they were really exposed, because I think they think, oh, he's from Puerto Rico, no one, it's not a big deal. Wrestling's not big there, and but I think they got caught. But throughout the tournament, you're like, man, that's too bad. I think that the better wrestler there didn't win that match. 57 kilograms, a Japanese wrestler, I think he got cheated. I don't have any proof of that, but I think you watch the match and you're like, it came down to a criteria point. The criteria was based on stalling, and the Japanese wrestler the offense offensive wrestler the whole time. So, you know, you have to stop and scratch your head and think, well, wait a second here, you know, that's not right. But it's tough because it runs deep. You know, even if you punish the officials over Gomez's match, it's not going to make any difference because it's, you know, that's like trimming the hedges. I mean, you've got the roots that are deep into the culture of the world wrestling leadership, which is it's too bad.
So is there anything you think we might be trying to do some of that? Because like you said, it feels really deep and there's so many levels to it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if I was more involved with USA Wrestling, and I'd be all over it. You know, I mean, it's unacceptable. I mean, you have 8-year-old kids, 9-year-old kids, and they're watching the Olympics. You know, how do you get motivated and say I'm going to commit my life to the sport of wrestling when you see somebody just clearly be cheated out of a chance to win an Olympic medal? I mean, it's horrible for our sport. And the countries where wrestling maybe is the most high profile, and you go to Russia, the wrestlers are driving Ferraris and Mercedes, and I mean they're professional athletes. They make millions of dollars. You know, those are the same countries that are going to get wrestling eliminated from the Olympics. So it's kind of it's just a shame, really. What are you going to do? I mean, it has to start from the top. It's not, well, let's investigate these 3 officials, because I was watching them. And when they were told they were out, I didn't see any kind of. There was no argument saying, "Hey, no, we." It was a judgment call. It was just they just quietly just left. You know, there was no protest. It was just too bad. So, and I mean, you feel terrible for Franklin Gomez. And the rules, you know, the first thing you got to do, I think, is if you're not big enough as a sport. This is going on and on. I'm sorry, but. If you're not big enough as a sport, you know, to deal with, I mean, you're talking about corruption, you're talking about mafia that's involved with sport internationally. You got to change the rules so it's not subjective, right? I mean, our rules are so subjective where the ref can play a part. I mean, you got to eliminate that to the very core, and so you can't just say, oh, it's a judgment call. This guy was stalling, so we give this guy a point. I think that's probably the first thing you have to do is make the rules just extremely subjective, just black and white, or not subjective, objective. My bad. But yeah, so I could talk for a long time. I mean, I've seen, you see the cheating, you lose a point here, but to just take Gomez and just cheat him out of a match, it's unbelievable. It's unacceptable. Yeah.
As a person, I mean, I know you haven't actually covered anything wrestling or anything like that. What's he like as a person? And did he recently?
Molinaro?
Yeah, I might have seen on Twitter. Did he recently have his first child?
He had a second child.
Second child.
His wife gave birth when he was one of the first days of the Olympics, so he just probably saw his child for the first time returning home yesterday. I mean, I know he did. I mean, obviously he was Skyping and those kind of things, but yeah, Molinaro's. I mean, he's a competitor. You know, I mean, you see, he's a guy where, regardless of what happened, you know, if the guy bites him, you know, he's getting headbutted. You know, he just keeps battling. You know, he's didn't give up, but he's made a ton of progress. He helped the U.S. team at the World Cup. You know, won some huge matches there, and is really setting himself up to be, you know, a legitimate world and Olympic champion contender moving forward. And that's his plan now. I mean, we moved him out of our volunteer coaching position because he wants to just train. You know, and as a volunteer coach, we need him with us and helping us and on the road with the team. And but he's made so much progress in just a short amount of time, technically, but a lot of it is just the way he thinks now, and I mean, his commitment. He was a little bit too big for his weight class, so he had a hard time recovering. So he shrunk his body down. That's discipline and commitment, and that was huge for him. You know, and the more committed you are, obviously, the more committed you are to fighting and competing throughout the match. So. You know, I couldn't be more happy or proud of him, really. I think he came a really long way. I mean, he was the 11 or 13 seed going into the U.S. trials, beat somebody that had beaten him all the way to the end, and to make the team. You know, you want the story to end with a gold medal, but that's, you know, it doesn't always work like that. But you know, we value effort, and we value the commitment that he put into it more than whether he won the medal or not. And I think in the long run, you know, that's really what he'll be disappointed, and he'll think, man, I was so close, you know, or why not this or why not that, but he'll be able to sleep well at night for the rest of his life because he knows he did everything he could to be successful.
We have time for one more.
How important is it to Frank there, even if obviously not the coaching monitoring role, but just to have him in the room with so many guys, obviously that's
Yeah.
very important.
Well, Molinaro brings incredible intensity to practice, and you know, he came back and I mean, it's a great story of sacrifice. He was the head assistant coach at a Big Ten school, probably being paid pretty well, and he said he wanted to put himself in the best situation possible to train, and he gave all that up, and you know, obviously took a huge pay cut to come and train, and just a couple of years ago. So. You know, that's another big part of his story, and he put himself in the right position. But just right away, his intensity and his focus in practice. Our volunteer coach left the sport and took a job. Nick Fanthorpe went back to Illinois to be closer to his family, and it was kind of a last second right before the year started, and so we were kind of caught there without an assistant. But we had Frank there, and the example that he provided every day was perfect. So I mean, he coached with us for 2 years, but he's still going to be around the program every day, training in the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club. Yeah, we're putting Jake Varner in that position. Yeah, he's Jake Varner's he's an Olympic champion, a world medalist, a 4-time NCAA finalist, 2-time NCAA champion. But credentials are great, but it's more about your attitude. Can you be a servant? Can you serve others and put them first? Because if you want to do well in coaching, you got to put your team ahead of yourself, obviously, and no ego, willing to do whatever is asked of him. So, I think he'll be a really good fit for us, and a guy that really understands the sport, has gotten the most out of his ability, and very good in the corner. Just keeping his poise and being able to see what needs to happen in critical moments, which I think is important. Okay, thanks, guys.
Everyone, very
Yeah,
much.
thank you.